someone was walking behind me. Every night. I was in my second year of college when this happened. Money was tight, so every evening after classes, I worked part-time at a small bookstore downtown. My shift ended at 10 o'clock, and by the time I started walking home, the streets were almost empty. Most people would have taken the bus. I couldn't afford it every night, so I walked. The route wasn't dangerous, at least that's what I believed. It took about 30 minutes and passed through a quiet neighborhood filled with old houses and narrow sidewalks. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. I would listen to music, keep my head down, and be home before 11. Then one Monday night, I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't close, maybe 30 or 40 feet away. I glanced over my shoulder. A man was walking in the same direction, dark jacket, hands in his pockets. I didn't think much of it. People walk home. It happens. A few minutes later, I crossed the street. So did he. I told myself it was a coincidence. At the next intersection, I turned right instead of going straight. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps behind me again. Still the same distance, still silent. That night I made it home without anything happening, but I couldn't stop thinking about him. The next evening, he was there again. Same jacket, same pace, same distance. Every time I looked back, he never sped up. He never slowed down. He simply followed. By Thursday, I was nervous enough to change my route completely. Instead of taking my usual streets, I walked through a neighborhood I'd never used before. The sidewalks were empty. The houses looked abandoned. For a moment, I thought I'd lost him. Then I heard it. Step, step, step. Behind me, exactly the same rhythm as before. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. I waited. Silence. When I started walking again, they started again. My heart was pounding. I pulled out my phone and pretended to make a call. Without turning around, I said loudly, "Yeah, I'm almost there. I'll see you in a minute." The footsteps didn't change. Whoever it was didn't care. I finally reached a brightly lit gas station. As soon as I walked inside, I looked through the front window. No one. The street outside was empty. The man had vanished. The cashier noticed I looked shaken. He asked if I was okay. I told him someone had been following me. He looked outside for a second. Then he said, "You're the third person this month." I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "People keep saying they hear someone walking behind them around here, but the cameras never show anyone." I didn't sleep much that night. The next evening, I asked one of my classmates to walk home with me. I wanted to prove I wasn't imagining it. Halfway home, I heard the footsteps again. Step, step, step. I looked at my friend. "Do you hear that?" He stopped walking. His face went pale. Slowly, he nodded. Neither of us turned around. We just kept walking faster. The footsteps stayed behind us, always the same distance. When we finally reached my apartment building, they stopped. My friend looked at me and quietly said, "I don't think it wanted me." The next day, he refused to talk about it. He never walked with me again. A month later, I bought a bicycle. I never used that route after dark. Sometimes, when I'm walking alone at night, I still hear footsteps behind me. I don't look anymore because deep down, I'm afraid one night they'll be close enough for me to feel someone breathing on the back of my neck. The car behind me never turned. I used to work as a delivery driver during the night shift. Most of my deliveries ended after midnight, and the roads were usually empty by then. I actually liked driving at night. There was something peaceful about it. No traffic, no crowds, just long stretches of road and the sound of my engine. One Friday night, I finished my last delivery around 1:30 a.m. Home was about 40 minutes away. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights behind me. Nothing unusual. Cars share the road. I didn't think about it. A few miles later, I took an exit that most people never used. The headlights followed. Still, that wasn't enough to worry me. Another 5 minutes passed. I turned onto a narrow country road surrounded by trees. The headlights turned with me. I checked my mirrors again. An old black SUV. Its headlights weren't bright. I couldn't see the driver. I told myself we were probably heading the same way. Then I made another turn. A road that led toward a small lake. Hardly anyone drove there at night. The SUV turned again. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I decided to test it. At the next intersection, I made 4 right turns around the same block. A complete circle. The SUV copied every single turn. Now I knew. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following me. I grabbed my phone. There was no signal. The road had become darker. The trees blocked almost every light. I kept driving, trying to stay calm. The SUV never got closer. It never fell behind. It stayed the exact same distance away, like it knew I'd noticed it. A few minutes later, I spotted a gas station. Relieved, I pulled in. The parking lot was empty. The store was closed. Every light inside was off. The SUV slowed down. For a second, I thought it would pull in behind me. Instead, it stopped across the road. Its headlights remained pointed directly at my car. Neither of us moved. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Whoever was inside never opened the door, never flashed the lights, never honked. They just waited. A terrible feeling settled in my stomach. I started the engine again and drove away. The SUV followed immediately. I was beginning to panic. Then I remembered something. About 15 minutes ahead was the county sheriff's station. It was open all night. I headed straight for it. For the first time, the SUV sped up. Not enough to catch me, just enough to make sure it stayed behind me. I turned into the sheriff's parking lot. The moment my tires crossed the entrance, the SUV slammed on its brakes. It didn't turn in, it made a U-turn and disappeared into the darkness. 2 deputies came outside after seeing how fast I had pulled in. I explained everything. One of them immediately checked the traffic cameras along the highway. After about 20 minutes, he came back looking confused. He asked me one question. "Are you sure it was behind you the whole time?" I nodded. He turned the monitor toward me. The footage showed my car driving alone, every camera, every intersection, every road. No black SUV, no headlights, nothing. I stared at the screen. I knew what I'd seen. The deputy paused one frame, then pointed toward the trees beside the road. "There is something strange." I leaned closer. Deep between the trees, barely visible in the darkness, were 2 small lights, perfectly matching the distance between headlights. But they weren't on the road. They were moving through the forest, keeping pace with my car. I never drove that route again. Sometimes, when I'm driving home late at night, I still check my mirrors, not for a black SUV, but for 2 lights watching me from between the trees. Someone kept following me through the forest. Last autumn, I decided to spend a weekend hiking alone. I had been working overtime for months and I needed a break from the city. I found a trail online that people described as quiet, beautiful, and rarely crowded. That sounded perfect. I arrived just after sunrise. The parking lot only had 3 other cars. The air smelled like wet pine, and a thin layer of fog hung between the trees. The trail stretched deep into the forest, winding through hills and old wooden bridges. For the first 2 hours, everything was peaceful. Birds chirped overhead. Leaves crunched beneath my boots. The only sounds around me were my own footsteps. Around noon, I reached a fork in the trail. A faded wooden sign pointed left toward the main path. Another narrow trail disappeared into the trees on the right. There was no sign, just a path that looked like people had walked it before. Curious, I chose the smaller trail. At first, it didn't seem much different. The trees grew closer together. The sunlight barely reached the ground. The forest became strangely quiet. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then, I heard footsteps, not mine. Another pair, slow, steady, behind me. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped. I looked back. The trail was empty, nothing but trees disappearing into the fog. I laughed quietly, maybe an animal, maybe the echo of my own boots. I kept walking. 30 seconds later, the footsteps returned. This time they sounded closer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Exactly matching the rhythm of my own steps. I turned around again. Still nothing. The strange thing was, the forest had become completely silent. No insects, no birds. Even the wind had disappeared. It felt as if the entire forest was listening. I checked my phone. No signal. The trail seemed narrower than before. Branches hung lower across the path. Some of them looked freshly broken, as if someone had passed through only moments earlier. I told myself I was imagining things. Then I found something that made me stop. Fresh footprints, not mine. They were larger, deeply pressed into the mud. They pointed in the same direction I was walking. Someone had been ahead of me. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made everything worse. Because every few minutes, I still heard footsteps behind me. How could someone be both ahead of me and behind me? I decided it was time to leave. I turned around. The path looked different. The trees didn't seem familiar anymore. I walked faster. The footsteps behind me became faster too. Never closer. Never farther away. Always the same distance. After 10 minutes, I reached the wooden bridge I had crossed earlier. Except, I was certain this wasn't the same bridge. The wood looked older. Several planks were missing. One side of the railing had collapsed. Someone had carved a single sentence into the wood. "Don't let it walk behind you." I stared at the words. They looked old, weathered, as if they'd been there for years. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind me, loud enough to echo through the forest. I spun around. For the first time, I saw someone, far between the trees. A tall figure, standing perfectly still. Its body was partly hidden by the fog, its face completely covered in shadow. I blinked. It was gone. I didn't wait. I started running. Branches slapped against my arms. Leaves flew beneath my feet. The footsteps exploded behind me, no longer walking, running, keeping perfect pace with me. Every time I sped up, it sped up too. I could hear breathing now, slow, heavy, too close. I refused to look back. The words on the bridge repeated inside my head. Don't let it walk behind you. Then something impossible happened. The footsteps suddenly stopped. Complete silence. I kept running anyway. After another minute, I burst out of the trees onto the main hiking trail. There were people, families, dogs, children laughing. The sounds of the forest returned instantly. I looked behind me. Nothing. The narrow trail I'd come from looked completely normal. An older park ranger noticed how out of breath I was. He asked if I had gotten lost. I told him everything: the footsteps, the bridge, the message, the figure. His expression changed immediately. He asked me one question. "Did you ever look directly at its face?" I said no. He nodded slowly. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Good." I asked what he meant. He looked toward the trees before answering. "People who describe a face usually aren't the ones who leave the forest." I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Before I drove home, I checked the trail map one last time. The narrow trail I'd taken wasn't on it. I searched online that night. Every version of the park map showed only the main trail. Nothing else. A week later, I went through the photos I'd taken that day. Most were normal: trees, bridges, the lake. Then I noticed the last picture. It had been taken by accident while I was running, in the distance. Between two trees, a tall, dark figure was standing perfectly still, watching me. I deleted the photo immediately. I haven't been back to that forest since. But sometimes, when I'm walking alone, I hear footsteps matching mine. And no matter how badly I want to, I never look back.